Okay, so this is the important part of the Smooth Master, which is the basket and the sprocket. Normally these this component is single piece on most clutch systems, but what the Casa Performance boys have done is that they've separated the actual sprocket itself from the housing for the clutch, and this is how the cush-drive system works. So these two parts have got movement between one another, and what you see here is these 4 fingers here that stick through from one side to the other, and rubber donuts go in here in all those 4 positions, and those are what give the cushion. So as there's an impact from a gear change, it will move like that and then back to the centre. Just that little bit is enough to stop gears smashing together. And so this is a 47 tooth, and obviously you can just swap to a 46 tooth. Now this one has got 4 rubber donuts in it that fit over there. On the actual Power Master, which is the cush-drive version for their really high-end engines, they use 8 rubber donuts, but they said so far they've never worn out any rubber donuts. So basically it's just a matter of pushing that back together, and then it screws up and it's sandwiched by this metal plate. So I'm just putting a drop of Loctite on the screws just to make sure they don't come loose, and then this holds the entire cush-drive assembly together, and because it's not tightly sandwiched, it means that there's that free movement when there's an impact. So not all the clutches on the market offer both GP style with a flat disc. This one's actually got a threaded centre, and also the SXLI type with the external nipple that presses against the clutch. But this one does both, and I can, by undoing this little circlip on the outside, I can swap this one to the other in this plate where there's a bearing underneath. But my side casing is GP, so I'm going to use this one. Normally there's 10 springs supplied, but I've only put 5 in because that's what I was told was probably enough for my engine. This comes with a disc washer and a slightly thinner centre nut. You can't just put any nut onto this because I had to get enough clearance for the cap. And also I was supplied with this Power Master tool, which goes on to hold everything while you're doing it all up tight. You can use it on the posts or on the screws themselves. So I mentioned before the problem that I've had with this AF clutch. You can see it's got a wear mark all around there where it's touched the kickstart shaft, but it doesn't on the other side, which obviously points to the fact that it's not rotating completely concentrically, and this sprocket never rotated completely concentrically either. It basically got tight loose, and so somewhere in the machining of these parts, possibly the centre where it's been broached, which means pushed through to make the splines, something is a little bit eccentric because the whole thing moves slightly eccentrically. But there's other areas of manufacture that can cause these issues, not just straight machining, because a lot of these parts tend to be machined and then afterwards they're heat treated. So on the Casa one, on the old ones, so what they were doing was they were getting these things all CNC machined, that would put all the teeth on, put all the parts, put splines in and things like that, anything that makes it concentric. Then they were sending it off for heat treatment, and what would happen is you'd get a bit of distortion from the heat treatment. They put it through a system they term rettificator, which means to rectify all the teeth and all the splines, all the surfaces, basically put everything back to concentric after it's distorted with the heat treatment. Now they don't do that anymore. So what the Casa Performance boys are doing now is a process they tell me costs 3 times as much for the heat treatment, but the heat treatment is done in a vacuum. So after the parts are initially machined, they're then heat treated in a vacuum, and they don't tend to distort. And while that does cost them a lot more in terms of the heat treatment process, it saves them all having to be rectified and go back on the CNC. So what they gain with one, they lose with another. And overall, it means the process of manufacture is actually quicker because it's one less process.